effort was instrumental in the downfall of Hitler's Germany. They succeeded in liberating many Nazi strongholds, but their support of the Allies came at a price. Churchill may have pledged to conquer together or die together with the Poles at the start of the war, but he had not bargained on the power of Stalin. When the Big Three met at the historic Yalta Conference to discuss the post-war world, it became clear that Stalin would not compromise on his plan to create a communist Eastern Europe. Soviet support may have helped to secure the end of the war, but it also meant the end of democracy in Poland.
You can't blame Britain, you can't blame America, because they needed Russia. They needed the fodder to beat the Germans in Russia, to help them with the invasion in France. So we had no option. We had to follow the bigger political partners to just accept what we get.
At the end of the war, a devastated Poland began to rebuild. But for many, the new post-war Poland was not a country they felt they could return to. There was widespread fear of the new Soviet-controlled communist regime, and many Polish soldiers feared that going back was dangerous.
The place where I was born was Soviet Union, and there was no way I was going to go back there, because I know what would have awaited me. I would have finished up again in Siberia. I spent nearly 2 years in Siberia as a child. I didn't want to go back there.
I was nearly sure if I went back, I wouldn't see my brothers and sisters, because later on it come true that a lot of them straight away just disappeared. They were taken back to Soviet Union, and that's it.
In 1947, the Polish Resettlement Act was passed, which entitled Poles to stay and work in Britain, and around 10,000 chose to make their home in Scotland. But the trade unions spread fear that a new wave of foreigners would have a detrimental effect on working conditions. Evidence now suggests that their actions were directly influenced by the communist regime in Warsaw and Moscow, who had an ulterior motive for promoting anti-Polish propaganda.
The instructions from the East were for all the Poles to go back to Poland.
The Russian authorities realized that there were tens of thousands of Poles who went through their horrible labor camps, that they were going to tell the population here in Scotland or in Britain, they were going to tell them the truth, and they wanted to avoid that.
It was in the media, very, very much. I often wish I had been able to keep cuttings of all the terrible things said in the press at the time.
Poles go home now, you know, you are liberated, you can go home, but they didn't know what kind of a liberation was behind the Iron Curtain. Uncle Joe, everything else was, oh, he is wonderful. But they didn't have a clue what Uncle Joe looked when you go into the Russia itself, which I didn't want part of it. Besides, my father told me that you're not coming back.
As the Poles attempted to build a life for themselves here in Scotland, the interned Italians had to decide what and where their future was to be.
Well, at the end of the war, I was offered the chance of staying on in Canada, and I really wanted to stay there. But then my father and mother had kept the shop going 1 day a week. God knows how they managed and what it must have been like. And they had this blind faith that their sons would come back, and that one day the shop that they had built and the shop that they had opened would be there for their sons. And I felt that really it was my duty, in a sense, to come back.
I started off again where I left off. And then I went with my brother. He had opened a little shop, and I went with him. So we just worked together from then.
A man's strength is on the inside, way down deep. I know you can't see it when you're looking at me.
I was on away for about 5 years, I think, 5 years, so it's not such a big eye. So the Glasgow was just the same as I left it at that time. And then, of course, the change came along. By that time, there's no much difference. I came back to the family, and that was me all right, as I was.
You have to dig deeper if you want a better love. That's just the
Some took a while to get back to normal, and some didn't, because some lost their husbands, of course, in that ship. Or some lost their businesses. Some of them went back to Italy, and so. But most people were okay. Okay.
That's just the way that it is.
So I came back to Glasgow, and I wondered how they're going to receive me, what are my old friends going to say. And literally the first few months, I couldn't look people in the face. I couldn't go on a tram car. I was afraid, let's put it that way. But then I found that my old friends treated me as though nothing had happened, and slowly but surely came back into the mainstream of life as it had been before the war.
At the end of the war, the people of Invergordon, where many Polish soldiers were based, gifted a plot of land to build a war memorial. This was in remembrance of the 125,000 Polish servicemen who died in the war, a loss which is commemorated every year.
Every year there is a ceremony held here in Invergordon. Essentially it's a ceremony of remembrance, exactly 1 week after Remembrance Day. And this is to remember those from Poland who gave their lives during the Second World War.
We now hear from the Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this, that my own joy may be in you, and your joy be complete." Standard bearers, attention! Standard bearers, carry standards!
This is my family plot in St Kentigern Cemetery in Glasgow, and it's amazing because all the names that are on the gravestone here, they're names that are repeated throughout the generations. That's Sergio Casci, that's me at the top there, that's my name. It's my great uncle who died as a young man. Giuseppe Casci, my own son's called Giuseppe, and this is my great uncle who died back in the 70s. And the other thing that strikes me coming here is looking around the tombs. There's lots of Italian names here. It's a bit of an Italian section, and apart from recognising the names, the villages they come from are like Barga, where I'm from, Borgo Mozzano that's down the road, places near Pisa, Garfagnana. So all these people that are buried here, their roots are in a tiny little part of Tuscany, and here they are buried many hundreds of miles away, but they're all in the little patch of land. And it's quite a moving feeling actually visiting this place. I always feel like that when I come here.
We have this wee dance every 6 or 7 weeks, and it's a wee